There we go. Okay, so we now have this session recording. So hello, Humber students. Welcome back to reorientation. My name is Nikki, and I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm an orientation senior leader, and I just finished my second year in a bachelor's of HR. I'm also your host for reorientation, so you might see me in a couple of other workshops. This is our financial aid session, so hopefully you get more information and have your questions answered. I have Sudhir here with me, and he'll be answering some of your questions today and giving you some more info. Just please note that we are in a virtual space, and to keep things respectful, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Nicole. Just going to share my screen here. All right. So we'll get started. This is just a PowerPoint on financial aid, all your financial aid options. Let's see. Okay, so there are a number of options you can use to fund your education. OSAP is one of the biggest ones, the main ones that people hear about. First thing, we'll go into details into each one. I'm just going to go over roughly. First, OSAP, first of all, it's not just loans. There is a grant portion to your OSAP loans if you're eligible. The grant portion, you don't have to pay back. The loans are what you have to pay back at the end of your study. We'll be going over how to apply, check your status, how calculations are done, and details about disbursement and repayment. Other than OSAP, you have the option from Humber to apply for scholarships, bursaries, and work study. We'll go over that in detail as well. And the other options you have outside of OSAP and Humber, for example, student lines of credit, off-campus employment, external awards, and we will also go over budgeting tips. Okay, so what is OSAP? OSAP is a government-funded program with both federal and provincial backing. And like I said, two portions, loans and grants. So when it comes down to it, OSAP essentially has four parts. Federal, provincial, and each of the federal and provincial has its own loan and grant portion. And as explained before, the loans are what you repay at the end of your study, and the grants you don't have to repay. Okay, and how much loans you get, how much grants you get, and total funding you're eligible for is all based on your financial need, right? So each student is going to have a different financial need, and because of that, no one student is going to get, no two students, sorry, are going to get the same amount of funding. Okay, and it's just one application that is used for both loans and grants. It's under the same umbrella. It's just OSAP. So who administers OSAP? Okay, this slide actually I would kind of redesign if it was up to me. I would have MTCU, Ministry of Training Colleges and Universities, at the top. I'll have one branch coming down to Financial Aid Office and another branch from MTCU coming down to NSLSC, okay, National Student Loan Service Center. So MTCU is the one who is administering OSAP, looking at the applications. After we confirm that the students are enrolled in the courses, they're the ones who release the funding. They release the funding to NSLSC. Financial Aid Office, what we do is help with the application process. If you have any questions with the applications, there's supporting documentation that students need to hand in to have their OSAP application finalized. So we help them with that. If you have trouble uploading, and any other questions with financial aid, you'd probably come to the Financial Aid Office at your school. Now, the NSLSC is the one that gets the funding from MTCU and releases it to the school and to the students. When it comes to the funding release and everything like that, it's NSLSC. When you're done your schooling, when you leave your school, 6 months, you would have to start repaying, and you would start repaying to NSLSC, not the Financial Aid Office. Who is eligible for OSAP? So first and foremost, you need to be a domestic student. Domestic student meaning a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or protected person. So international students do not qualify for the OSAP program. You need to be a resident of Ontario. So what it means to be a resident of Ontario, at least in regards to OSAP, is in Canada, Ontario must be the last province you've resided in for 12 months in a row. So as an example, let's say you lived in Ontario years ago, and then you moved to, let's say, Alberta, okay, and you just moved back to Ontario after 2 years. You're a resident of Ontario, sure, but in regards to OSAP, you're a resident of Alberta because that's that province that you've lived in 12 months in a row last. So if that's the situation for you, you would have to apply for student aid from the province of Alberta, not Ontario. So you need to be entering an OSAP approved program and school. Humber College is an OSAP approved school, but not all of our programs are OSAP approved. If you're going into a diploma program, a degree program, or an Ontario College Certificate program, it's likely that it is an OSAP approved program. But we have many other programs, Certificate of Achievement programs, Certificate of Completion programs. These are continuing education courses and programs that we call. These are general interest, and they typically do not qualify for OSAP funding. How to apply. It's available at ontario.ca OSAP, or you can just type in osap.ca. It'll take you to the same website. It does say paper application here. Given the current situation, our office is closed, so we do not accept paper applications at the moment. Hopefully things will change in the near future, but at the moment, we're dealing everything online. So osap.ca, if you're a new student, you will first have to set up an account using your SIN number. After you set up your account, you can file a new application for the academic year you're coming into. OSAP calculations. So starting from the left side, allowable educational costs. This is how OSAP calculates how much funding to disperse to a student. So under allowable education costs, we have tuition fees, books and supplies, equipment, computer costs, personal living expenses during your study period, childcare if you have children, dependent children, and travel costs to and from school. These are the educational costs that you're assessed for. And then moving to the right, this is your expected financial contribution, meaning the assets or you have, right? Student income, student assets, parental income, spousal income, and spousal assets. So what OSAP does is takes the total educational costs, depending on your financial situation, and then subtracts your expected financial contribution, again, based on your financial situation. And then that number is the calculated financial need. And that's what they use to assess what you're eligible for in terms of total funding. OSAP funding limit. Okay, so this slide, I'm going to emphasize that this is the situation right now for the 2020-2021 academic year. This is always changing. It was different for the current year, 2019 to 2020 was, I believe, $460 per week for single students with no dependents, and $630 per week for married, common law, or sole support parents. Okay, so what this means is, let's say you're just starting school, you're in let's say 2020, fall 2020 to April 2021, 2 semesters, fall and winter. That's about 33 weeks. For that study period, if you're a single student with no dependent, you can get a maximum of $545 per week. So 545 times 33. And again, it all depends on your financial situation. 545 per week is just the maximum. Disbursement and repayment. Okay, OSAP is typically released in 2 installments. Like I said, if you're here for fall and winter, you get 2 installments, 1 in fall, 1 in winter. Okay, one thing to be careful about is the way OSAP works is it's a 60-40 split, meaning in the fall, you get 60% of the total OSAP funding for the year. And the reason why OSAP does that is because they just want to give you a little advance just to manage your expenses a little better. So students often ask, why am I getting less this semester than I did last semester? This is the reason why. It's a 60-40 split. Okay, and if you're coming back in the summer, then there's an extension form you can fill out and we can extend it. There'll be a third installment. Now, it's a little different for certain programs. There are certain programs that just have 3 semesters, right? And these are typically Ontario College Certificate programs. The whole program is just 3 semesters. In those cases, students need to be careful because they're expecting 3 installments. But the way it works with 3 semester programs is you only get 2 installments, and the 2 installments contain funding for all 3 semesters. So when it comes to that, you need to be careful. You need to see your total funding and budget accordingly. Okay, yeah, to remain eligible for OSAP, students must maintain good academic standing. So what that means is if you apply for full-time OSAP funding, you need to remain in a full-time course load for the duration of your study period. So if OSAP released funding, let's say for fall 2020, you're in a full-time course load, and you decide it's too much, can't handle it, so you drop a few courses and you drop to part-time, then your study period ends as of the day you drop to a part-time course load. Okay, and at that point you'll be placed on academic probation with OSAP. Also, you will have a bit of an overpayment in your OSAP funding because you're only full-time for a certain period, but you were funded for the whole semester. So the remainder of the semester, the funding that was allocated for that time period is now an overpayment. And another way you can get into academic probation and the overpayment is if you drop completely, withdraw from all your courses. And if you get 2 academic probations in a row, then you'll be placed on academic restriction, and then you would not be eligible for OSAP funding until a year after that. So you got to be careful. What we recommend students is if you are making any changes in your registration after receiving OSAP funding, talk to a financial aid advisor and just ensure that there won't be any repercussions with your OSAP funding. Right? You always want to make sure. Payment. Okay, so when it comes to OSAP repayment, it says 6 months after you graduate or end of your studies. Well, it's regardless of graduation date. If you leave your full-time studies for 6 months or more, you're expected to start repaying at that point. Okay, so fall 2020 you start, winter 2021 you're continuing. You can take the summer break off and then come back in the fall with no repercussions because it's less than 6 months. 6 months after you leave full-time studies, you're expected to start repaying. And the way interest works is interest only gets charged after you leave full-time studies. So the day after you leave full-time studies, interest starts to get charged. But if you come back to school for full-time studies again within 6 months, those interest charges get reversed. Okay, you have 14.5 years to repay. There are several loan repayment assistance plans and loan repayment calculator you can use. And this is all done through the National Student Loan Service Center. You can see their website there, canlearn.ca, and that's their number, 1-888-815-4514. Okay, moving away from OSAP, other options you have to fund your education. There's the work study program at Humber, which is very recommended. It's very convenient, right? In comparison to off-campus work, right? First of all, you have the convenience of working right on campus. You know, you can work between breaks. If you have a long break between 2 classes, you can use that to work. And another thing is, since it is a work study program, all of the employers with this work study program understand that you're a student. So all of their employees are work study students. So they can work with your schedule. They will, gather all the schedules for all the employees and come up with a schedule that works best. And another good thing is, I believe you're not allowed to work more than 24 hours. So it creates a nice work-school balance. Okay, and to be eligible, of course, you need to be in satisfactory academic standing with Humber. You have to be a full-time student, again, a domestic student, meaning Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or protected person, and you must demonstrate a financial need. Okay, at the bottom there, it shows you how to apply for the work study. You have to go on your My Humber, Student Awards and Financial Aid, apply for student aid, and select the academic year. You will see work study in the drop-down menu. And then there are bursaries that Humber offers. Okay, again, these are for full-time programs, certificate, diploma, degree programs. As explained earlier, we have other programs, continuing education, certificate achievement programs. They do not qualify for these bursaries. So they need to be in a full-time program. We have tuition bursaries. that are typically offered in the beginning of the semester. Financial need bursaries. Now, these are bursaries that are granted to students who demonstrate an unforeseen financial burden in the middle of their study period, right? If they're going into the semester knowing that they have this financial burden, they would not qualify for this, right? So they go into this study period, and then for some unforeseen reason, they have a financial burden. If they can demonstrate that with documentation, Humber will be able to provide some sort of help. Ontario first generation bursaries. Now, these are given to students who are the first generation in their family to attend post-secondary. Now, this is by invite. This is all pulled from your OCAS application. When you apply for college on the OCAS website, it will ask you if you are the first person in your family to attend post-secondary. And if you ticked off yes, then you will be in our report, and then using that report, we'll send an invite to your email saying you can apply for the Ontario First Generation bursaries. You would apply, and then depending on your application, you get approved. Ontario Student Opportunity Trust Fund. Now, this is the it's a bursary that Humber and the government puts into, right? And they put money into, and it's put into endowment that earns interest, and the interest is used to hand out bursaries to students. Student access guarantee bursaries. Now, these are kind of tied into OSAP. The government mandates that schools kind of make up the difference. So there are programs that are exceptionally expensive, and OSAP cannot always cover the total costs, right? In those cases, for students who are in expensive programs that OSAP can't cover the total cost, Humber or schools in general are expected to kind of help with the difference. And that's what student access guarantee bursaries are. Study abroad international mobility bursaries. It's kind of self-explanatory. If you are in a study abroad program recommended by your program coordinator or your professor, there are bursaries you can work with. These are typically done with your program coordinator or your professor, and they will hand us the information and we'll process it from there. Scholarships. Okay, there are a number of scholarships as well. Academic scholarships, entrance scholarships, application-based scholarships, and degree scholarships. Now, academic scholarships, entrance scholarships are also application-based. You'd have to apply for them based on the criteria. There is a website I will share at the end here. But the degree scholarships is for students who are coming into degree programs. This is not application-based. This is done automatically based on your high school grades. Based on your grades, you can earn a certain amount of scholarship money, and most of them are renewable as long as you maintain an 80% average throughout your years at Humber College. There are some websites here for external scholarships. There are much more on the website I was going to share. I'll share that in just a minute. Other options outside of Humber and OSAP. Students can obviously apply for a student line of credit. There are competitive interest rates, but there is monthly interest, and repayment of principal amount begins right after graduation, and there are co-signers usually required. Okay, now this is always an option, but it is not recommended. OSAP, obviously, is the number one choice, right? The reason why is like it says here, monthly interest, right? You don't have that with OSAP. You don't have to worry about OSAP loans until 6 months after you graduate, right? There's no interest building up while you're in school. And obviously there's no co-signers required, right? Student line of credit, I don't think I've known any student that does apply for student line of credit, but these may be the students who find themselves in academic restriction and not eligible for OSAP. This might be their only option. Okay, and besides work study, employment off campus, registered education savings plan, and registered education savings plan, RESP. This is something that you can use, and part of the OSAP application, you need to report your income and your assets. RESP is one thing you do not need to report. And sorry, we have external awards. Yeah, same websites as before. These will be listed on the other website as well. Okay, now budgeting. Budgeting is very important. We see a lot of students who just run through their money without having a plan, and they're in a tough spot at the end, and they're not able to pay their tuition fees, they can't pay their rent, and they're struggling to pay for grocery and stuff, right? So it's important to budget. Okay, first thing is to plan, right? You want to identify everything that you have. You want to write down on a piece of paper the income you have, what assets you have, what's your savings, what income you have coming, what's your OSAP looking like, do you have any bursaries that you're expecting, scholarships. That's your income, right? It's kind of similar to the way OSAP is calculated, and the bursaries, the budget calculator. You want to take your assets and your income, okay, and you want to subtract from that your expenses, right? Your rent if you're living away from home, food, tuition, textbooks, and all other miscellaneous expenses. And then you'll have what you either a surplus or a deficit, right? You don't want a deficit. You want a surplus, right? If you do see a deficit, you need to either maximize your income or reduce your spending, right? Ideally, you want to do both. You want to reduce your spending and maximize your income, right? But you won't be able to come up with that, right? Unless you plan. You need a plan. You won't be able to do that until, put pen to paper. Yeah, that's about it. I will, just 1 second, I will share the website I was talking about. There's a website here, okay? And if you scroll down, you have scholarships over here, bursaries, there's external awards, bursaries and scholarships, and there's Aboriginal Student Awards, bursaries and scholarships, okay? So scholarships and bursaries we've already talked about in the presentation. These are the external awards you can apply for, right? You see the names here, details, learn more, how to apply. That's about it. That's our information there. You have our office location and our hours. Obviously, this time we're not at our offices. We're dealing with student inquiries mainly through email. Our phone number is over there. Obviously, we're not dealing with students over the phone as well. Our phone services have been suspended for the moment. finaid@humber.ca. That's how we're answering inquiries at the moment. We are working on platforms to deal with students virtually. There are a few options we're toying with, but right now we have nothing nailed down. Once we do, we will be notifying students. But for now, finaid@humber.ca is your main connection to us. That's about it.